¿Estamos determinados por nuestra historia familiar? ¿Qué tanto nos marcan los errores de nuestros padres? ¿Cómo transformar la culpa, la vergüenza y el dolor en una experiencia trascendente para nuestra vida y la de otros? Hoy platicaremos sobre estas cuestiones desde la perspectiva del hijo de uno de los perpetradores del Holocausto. Nos acompaña Bernd Wollschlaeger. Que la curiosidad nos lleve a donde nos tenga que llevar. Soy Malkah Nobigrot. Bienvenidos a Vis T2. Buenas noches y bienvenidos a esta segunda temporada de Vis T2. Hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial, Bernd Wollschlaeger. Welcome to the show and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yours is a journey of introspection, of doing what in the Jewish religion we say tikkun olam, which is in a way doing right the wrong of the world, and in particularly the wrong that your father did. So let's start by saying who was your father and what were the stories that he used to tell you about the Second World War in a Germany at a time that people wanted to swipe, in a way, the war under the rug and not speak very much about it.
My father was the youngest tank commander in the German army, in an elite unit of the German army that was led by a general called Guderian. So in this elite unit he was his personal assistant, battled on every war front, and glorified the war when he talked about the war to me. Every time he talked about the war and his old friends talking about the war, the so-called old comrades, they glorified the war as the best time of their life.
He was awarded by Hitler himself the Iron Cross, so he was a hero for many colleagues of his, and maybe you grew up even with that image of your father as a hero.
Absolutely. Technically he was a war hero, bearer of the Knight's Cross, and glorified by his friends and people around him. And for me, as a young boy, my father was a hero. What else shall I think about him?
And when did you start being in contact with the other side of the story? And how did you, because for many Germans, if you see many documentaries, for instance, Monika Hertwig in Inheritance, she in a way justifies the actions of the father, like many other children of the perpetrators, as saying that he was a good man in a bad time. What makes you tilt and say, well, what my father is saying is not exactly, it's one side of the story, but there is another side? What originates that?
Well, there are actually two events in my life that shaped the course of my personal life story. Number one, we lived in a house in Bamberg, which was the home of the family Stauffenberg.
The hero.
So I contrasted my father's life with the life of this man who, of course, was not alive anymore. He was executed on the 20th of July 1944 after the assassination attempt on Adolf Hitler failed, which he led. And his widow upstairs told me stories about her husband. She had grandchildren. I played with the grandchildren. I saw the pictures of her husband who looked like my father in uniform. But he had a different story, and my father referred to him as a traitor.
Traitor, exactly.
So I contrasted this picture of this man with my father's pictures that I saw at home and their life stories. So doubt came up, something else happened. Secondly, a horrific event took place in Germany in September 1972, the murder of the Israeli athletes during the Olympics in Munich. And this was not only a horrific event, it was an event that shaped Germany. And for the first time in school, I heard about the murder of the Jews, not as an accident of history, collateral damage of the Second World War, which we learned, but as a systematic, planned murder of an entire people in the name of Germany, not in the name of a war, in the name of Germany. And I asked my father.
But your father used to refer to it as something as accidental in a way. You once tried to get in touch with your father once you knew these two versions, and what did he tell you? How did he address this episode in the German history?
Yeah, the first response that I heard from my father was that it is a lie. And I should not listen to my teachers because they're all communists. They're trying to indoctrinate me. So I knew that there's something wrong, because how can it be that my teachers who are telling me the truth normally all the time telling me a lie? And my father, who's telling me the truth all the time, is now telling me that this is a lie. I was confused. I was confused contrasting these two stories. And I asked myself, what happened? And I started to search and investigate. And then the doubt came up. What did my father do? Was he one of those people who did that? And if he did so, what shall I do with that knowledge? But I needed to find out first. And I asked him questions.
Could you? Because he apparently was a very strict father, a father that was educated in a very different way as we were educated and as you educate your children. So could you have that kind of relationship of openness with your father, of speaking those facts in such a way? Because apparently, for what I've read about you, he was a person that was glorified by everybody around him. He was a hero. And addressing that part was counter the narrative that he had, in a way, told you about the war and about what he believed himself to be. So
I feared and respected my father.
Mm-hmm.
I loved him, and I also was in a certain distance from him. And when I knew that I couldn't come close to him emotionally, the only way I could come close to him when he was drunk. He was an alcoholic. And so I knew that there was a time during the day when he was tipsy. And I could ask him questions. He was vulnerable to emotions, to questions, to anything. And so I asked him questions. And the truth came out bit by bit. First denial, then tactic admission. Something happened, but it was not us. And if it happened, there must have been a reason, until he completely admitted what happened, and not only admitted what happened, defended what happened.
But he participated directly in the killing of civilians, in your knowledge, and what did he do?
During his lifetime, he never told me.
Okay.
I found out actually just in January of this year, when I gave lectures in Germany for the first time in 28 years. In my hometown in Bamberg, I was invited by the city, by several schools, to talk about my life. And coincidence or providence, a military historian approached me, a military historian who wrote the history and maintained the history of my father's unit, a famous tank unit.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought me a suitcase to my hotel room, a little suitcase, a metal suitcase. Said, this was given to me by the family members of your father's late tank mechanic, and I should give it to you because you're the son of the commander. They don't know what to do with it. I was confused. I said, what is that? And he opened it, and inside, wrapped into a towel, were ripped pieces and shredded pieces of Torah scrolls. And the story behind was that when my father's unit tore up Jewish villages, killed everybody, and then invaded the synagogue, they tore out these Torah scrolls, ripped them into slices, soaked them in water, and used them as insulation material for tank engines. And these remnants of the Torah scrolls, his late tank mechanic brought back to Germany as a memento, or maybe out of shame, I don't know. This was evidence that not only did he know about it, but he participated.
Okay, so then why didn't you stay at that moment with that knowledge, and why you were this teenager that was growing up with these conflicting versions about the war? And teenagers are by themselves already conflicted of many things. But what makes you go with this Jesuit priest that leads you in a way to the Jewish community and to approach a Jewish community that were mainly not even your generation? What makes you approach them and start your interest in the Jewish religion and have this contact and this rapport with them?
I was primarily motivated by guilt and shame, but I also was motivated by curiosity. I wanted to understand why them the Jews. Why target them? Who are they? What makes them, if I may use the term, worthwhile to be killed? There must have been a reason. I want to find out. What makes them separate? What makes them unique? And so by approaching them, learning from them, I slowly grew into a Jewish community and a Jewish lifestyle. I became interested in culture, in language, in religion. And over several years, 7 years actually, I grew into a Jewish life.
But you were living in a way you were living with your parents, and you were living a parallel life with this Jewish community. What happened then? What made you decide that after a certain moment to break with your family? Because it's not easy to break with your family, and especially with your mother, that you were very in tune with her, apparently.
Physically, I was in contact with my family, but emotionally, I grew away from them. There was something missing. There was this distance, this emotional distance, the inability to open up, the inability to share, the inability to be honest. And from the other side, I found warmth, empathy, the connection to them, to myself, to a faith which I never had. And so I grew out of my family of origin into a family of choice. And I made the final step out of conviction, motivated by guilt, and then finally reached, after 7 years, the point of conviction. And I converted to Judaism.
And after you converted to Judaism, what made you, in a second time in your life, go to Israel? Because it's not you can convert to Israel and to the Jewish religion and stay in Germany, which were needed in Germany in a way for the Jewish community.
I could have stayed in Germany. I could have lived in Germany. But I decided that the place where I, as a young man, just finished and graduating from medical school, single, that the only way for me to begin a new life is to begin it at a different place. In the same time, but a different place. And so I migrated to Israel, actually was accepted as a new immigrant, and migrated to Israel and began tabula rasa. And in Israel, I became an Israeli. I literally stepped out of the shadow of my father, ran away, to be very honest, turned my back towards my past, and became a different person. Now, the mistake that I made, we can talk about this, that I did not connect to my past. I disconnected.
But we're going to talk about this once we take a small break.
Amigos, vamos a tomar una pequeña pausa y regresamos en esta interesante entrevista.